Thank you for being so kind as to be here, because I know that awesome things are going on upstairs, and so we're all extremely flattered. And I'm not remotely big-headed enough to think that you're here for me. You're here for two of the most interesting people I know. First is David Karp, the founder of Tumblr, who really needs no introduction at all, but therefore I will give him none. But is now, of course, just a lowly employee at Yahoo somewhere. Poor guy. And then, more interestingly to me, because I've just been having awesome conversations with him all day, Georg Petschnigg, the founder of FiftyThree, which is less well-known, but should actually, in many ways, be more well-known because it's just the most awesome company, and their app, their first app called Paper, just won the App of the Year award, very deservedly so. And what these
App of the Year from Apple.
From Apple, not from like me or anyone, you know, stupid, but from Apple, and they know apps. And the reason why Apple gave it the App of the Year award is just that what it has done is it has turned your tablet, which you have anyway, into this unbelievable engine for creativity and creation. And this is what I want to talk about today, because normally I'm a financial journalist and people come up to me and they go, talk to David about advertising and monetization and stuff like that. But really, what's much more interesting and much more important is this whole concept of creativity, and how I was on the plane over here, I was reading the new book by Erik Brynjolfsson, and The Second Machine Age, and what he says, and he's absolutely right about this, is that the jobs which are routine are going to be replaced by robots. And this has nothing to do with whether it's a highly cognitive, sophisticated job or a very sort of low-level manufacturing job. If it's just doing the same thing in a way that you can teach a computer to do it, which includes now pretty sophisticated things like playing chess, then you will be replaced by a robot. The way to not get replaced by a robot is to do what he calls ideation, being able to create something out of nothing. And for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, the way that people have best thought up new ideas is with paper and pencil and whiteboards and scribbling things down. And what we have, what George has created in Paper is really the first app of this new, bringing that whole ideation into the web era and making it shareable using David's tools, and that is what we're going to talk about. So, George, what are we seeing behind us, and what's going on here?
These are some of the products we've built. You're seeing here is actually our most recent product is called Pencil, but really talking about creativity. What is it? It's this mythical thing, but when you think about creativity, it's really taking one part familiar and adding something new. And and what starts creativity or the need to create, right? What you're talking about, if you have a routine job, it will be replaced by an algorithm and a robot. It is, but how do you really, so the challenge of our day is to create and to keep creating. And creating once is easy, but creating day in and day out, that's very hard. But there are a lot of motivators. For me, I never was able, for example, to draw watercolor, right? It always ended up in some brown puddle. And it was a frustration that started in school, and I kept that with me all the way through my universities, and then at some point I had studied computer graphics and computer science, and now I was able to program machines to help me draw watercolor. And some of those capabilities you can find in Paper. And on the screen you see Pencil. It's a stylus that you can use to really easily sketch and write and draw in the app. But the second part of creativity is, going back to adding one part familiar with one part new, means that you got to mix things up. And that's where Tumblr was just such a natural partner to us, because when you think about Tumblr, it is this infinite canvas. It's this fabric on this internet that hosts lots of different media types. And for us, it just became an incredible experimentation ground. And in particular, what's been fascinating is seeing what people have been doing with Paper and Tumblr. Should maybe jump in.
Yeah, so I mean, look, the reason that we've been so just taken by all of the work that George and his team have been doing is, it's responsible for some of the most interesting stuff that we then go on to see Tumblr. So to just back up a little bit and talk about not just the things that we're working on, but what we're so excited about, technology moves forward today at an unbelievable pace. And it's really easy to get caught up in how that helps us communicate, how that helps our health, how that helps our lifestyle. One of the things that I think is often overlooked is the profound effect that it has on creation and the art and media that we enjoy. And along the way of marching forward on medical technology and information technology and communication technology, you also have technology breakthroughs, that lead to Pixar. I mean, that could not have existed. That art could not have existed before the technology. And more and more, if you look at this creative stack today, it's come not just more advanced than what we had 10 years ago. It's much more accessible. It's much more democratized than the editing suites and recording studios and the Cray mainframes that you used to need to render this stuff. Really not that long ago, and now all of a sudden you have some of the most creative horsepower in the world in this thing that we all have in our pockets, one of the highest resolution slow-mo video camera. I mean, you think about what you used to have to do to just record a video, even 5 to 7 years ago. You had a big clunky camcorder that had 3 hours of battery life, and now the stuff is ubiquitous. And this is the stuff that folks like George are starting to push forward and actually allowing art and media to be created that could not have existed, actually would not have existed otherwise, could not have existed otherwise if it weren't for their software, and even more impressive today is the hardware, which is a real feat.
Actually Danielle Sturley was the first person to tell me, you should check out this Tumblr thing. This was at Art Basel 2010. And just had moved back to New York City, and tech scene was happening, and she mentioned, just check out this Tumblr thing, and I didn't get it. Right? I looked at it at first, and I was like, I don't understand this. But then you start using it, and the idea, right, that what is the web? I mean, the web is a collection of websites, or if you ask Al Gore, it's just a bunch of tubes, right? But most importantly, it's stories, it's pieces of information, and having a place where we can put them. That's what Tumblr made really, really easy. And there's another story around that is being then in New York City, right? When you think about this, in New York City, there are media channels, there are a lot of publishers, there are a lot of big stages in that sense. But the web has democratized that. Anyone can have a stage. You might not have an audience, but you'll have a stage, right?
But you're both based in New York City, which is one of the most creative cities in certainly the US.
It's up there.
It's up there. And this is no accident. But are we going to see, even as creativity and these tools become democratized and become accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world, are we still going to wind up with these hubs of creativity, be they New York or Berlin or wherever?
Well, creativity, you live off of other people. One of the great joys of being in New York City is every roadblock, every corner, every interaction sparks your mind. If you love people, if you love stories, if you love creative disciplines, New York is an amazing place. But I think yes, creativity and being inspired by smart and inspiring people has a grouping effect. Richard Florida writes a lot about this in the rise of the creative class. But I think there is a bigger challenge there, right? Not everyone can live in New York. Not everyone will have access to fast internet. Not everyone will have access to computers. And so when it really goes, and then looking at, the coming machine age, right? It is really happening, and really making sure that everyone will have a chance to exercise their creative muscle. It means people need access to tools, they need access to networks, they need great access to this, because it can't just be for New York, right? It needs to be for the world, right? It is a fundamental human need to create. Everyone should be empowered to do that.
So I would say I don't know that I would have enough insight to say whether or not the value of the sort of industry town is diminished over time. Clearly, if you're in animation or film, there's a real advantage to being in Los Angeles. I think the most exciting thing right this moment is the thing that is absolutely being proven is you can build that audience from anywhere. So whether or not then there's an advantage after you've made it, and this is probably pretty clear, probably most clear with YouTube celebrities, because for them, if you're in film, it's an obvious jump to swing over to LA, which is what a lot of them are doing, to go work for the studios. That makes sense, but they're finding that audience, they're getting on the radar totally independent of that system. And it used to be you really had to suck up to that system. You really had to find your way through those big institutions and get blessed before you could get in front of an audience. And now that audience is there for you in a very meritocratic place on networks like Tumblr and YouTube. And you make the work. You don't need the recording studio. You don't need the budget. You show up. You can do it with a $2 app, in your case a free app, and make work that in some cases rivals the stuff being put out by the studios. You can do that. You can put it out there into the world on a network like Tumblr or YouTube. You can find the audience.
Tumblr is just an amazing
platform. You don't need to ask permission. That's where it gets really exciting.
For people to express their creative output. It's kind of the best platform that's ever been invented for that. So what I want to know from you, David, now you've done this, and now you've sold it to Yahoo, like where does this go? I mean, I feel, what's next in the grand global domination?
The mission, I mean, what we started as and what we've been doing for the last 6 years absolutely hasn't changed, and it's one that we still have a ton of work to do on. So our job is stretching the canvas, so helping creators make their best work and get it in front of an audience. The technology is moving what's possible, which means that the boundaries of that canvas should keep stretching. That means that we have a lot of work to do. It means that we have, slow-mo video, high-res panoramas, more bigger photos, beautiful illustrations, whole new types of art that haven't existed before. I mean, so when you can take a 3D photo that you can pan around on your phone using the accelerometer, when you can make high-res animation, the day that you start sending us animation, how do we deal with that? How do we make a spectacular mobile experience around it that's fast and works just as well as the big immersive desktop experience? That's the stuff that we are constantly challenged by, is the technology keeps moving forward and the creators want to keep surprising us. So our role in this is keep up with the technology, show the world what's possible. I shouldn't say show the world what's possible, but show the creative community the edges of that canvas and how much wider they just got, and inspire them to do something that even we never expected. And that is absolutely, I'm sure you find the same thing, the absolute most fulfilling thing in working in the creative end of this rather than the social end of this. You kind of know you know that people, when you're building Gmail, you know how people are going to be using the thing. If you're doing your job with information technology like Google or Wikipedia, you win if you can build the shortest path between the person and the information. We have no idea what's going to come out of our communities. It is an unbelievably fulfilling thing to wake up every day and be surprised thousands and thousands of times over by what people do with our apps. It is an awesome thing to behold, and it's making life on Earth a little bit better.
That's the thing with creativity. You really don't know what you get until you give it a try, and you have to give it a full try, right? And products you make and the experiences, and it's true. I mean, it's one of the great delights of I mean, that's why I think I have like the best job, because I actually get to be part of everyone's creativity every day, and you're just constantly delighted.
Okay, I'm going to ask the boring business question, because it's not actually a boring question. It's a kind of interesting business question, which is these unbelievable, your platform, your free app, the explosion in creative opportunities and the new canvases which are being created and being unbelievably democratized and available to everyone. Which industries does this disrupt?
By the way, it's free with paid upgrades. So we do.
And this is what, $59?
It's $59 and $49.
$59, cheap at 3 times the price. I can show you. But like, which industries have the greatest opportunity, and which ones ought to be scared?
So I think today, this is my take. I'd love to hear yours, George. So today, this is a way underserved market. We used to have some real tech giants. We used to have, Adobe and Apple really driving this. I would say they're not quite at the bleeding edge of technology like they used to be. And it's folks like George that are really pushing what is possible, what kind of bits you can generate, and what those bits can look like on screen, what they can do, and how they make you feel. That's a really important role. And more and more, there's a growing ecosystem of these creative apps that make it possible to make stuff that you couldn't make before. But I think it is way, way underserved right now. On the other side, closer to where we play on the audience and distribution side of this, you would maybe say that we're coming along and disrupting the institutions. The big institutions like studios, networks, publishers, record labels, these guys that now a whole lot of creators don't need to go and get the blessing from to get the resources to produce their album and put it out there in the world. They can go and they can make their albums themselves in GarageBand or some other great cheap software. They can put it out there into the world. They can find an audience that's as big as the one that Atlantic or Sony Records would be able to get you. And they're even now starting to be able to use things like Songkick, Kickstarter, VHX, and these things to commercialize it. So more and more, they're not having to ask permission. You would say, and they can go it totally on their own. I think what's really happening, though, is you have more people who are trying. The ones that are proving themselves then have the choice of graduating into those big institutions, which are finding more ways to be more relevant and serve those up-and-coming creators. And you have a widening, I hate to use the word long tail in 2014, but you have this growing community, I would really say growing army of independent creators who just decide to go it totally on their own. And the really cool thing about that community is they might be novel in how they approach their business. They might not be trying to sell you an album. They might have totally rethought what their commercial relationship with you is, with their audience is. The other thing that's cool is it supports creators that wouldn't have been able to get blessed through the big institutions. Somebody who is, some art form. I mean, a good example is illustrators, right? Illustrators didn't have the opportunity to go on and become Justin Bieber, but they're finding audiences. They're building careers through these democratized tools. That's a remarkable thing, and I don't think it changes the fact that we still go to see blockbuster movies. We still watch Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, but there are many, many hours a week to enjoy this stuff, and there are only so many new episodes of Game of Thrones, and more of that time is being filled with awesome art and media being generated by this community of independent creators, and they're using tools like...
And also the sort of remixes which platforms like yours make so much easier.
When you look at on the tools side, back in 2008, in the United States, non-entertainment technology spend was $100 billion, right? So, what is it? It's a huge market. I mean, that's the Word, the Adobe suites, that's a new laptop, right? So there's a lot of tools, and what is it people are doing? And this is not business spend, this is consumer spend, right? So people are clearly buying tools. They're clearly buying something, because when you think about it, you have only one life. What are you going to do with that life? I hope you're going to create. I hope you're going to invent, right? That is such a fundamental human need. And I think actually when I look back, and David was speaking about the dearth of emphasis on creativity over the last decade, it's sad. I mean, we spent a lot developing financial products, which you wrote about. We spent a lot of time developing new advertising networks. But you know what? Technology is really there to serve the human need to create.
And by the way, for the record, go out there, be innovative, create lots of great, exciting new things. Just don't do it in the financial area, please, because.
Yeah. So what really happens, right? Because the reason why we're so positive is because we're betting on a resource that's just not going to go away. It's human ingenuity. It just gets better. That's the one thing that we have plenty of, and we need to use and get better at.
And we also don't, conversely, have enough of sort of the way that the educational system was set up in the Victorian era to create computers, where the word computer originally referred to people, not to machines. And now we have machines to do the work of being a computer, and we need to retool the entire educational system around much more human ideation.
I'd love to just share a couple stories, right? So one Tumblr, one of my favorite Tumblr, it's so Tumblr, it's Andrew Draws Cats, right? There's this guy who just started drawing cats with paper, posting them to Tumblr. It's very fitting for anyone who's on Tumblr. There are a lot of cats on Tumblr. But he started drawing cat cartoons, hundreds of them, to the point that he got burned out. But somewhere along the story, his cat started eating cakes, right? Okay, this is a true story. And he spent more time than decorating the cakes in his cartoon. He ends up switching careers into cake making, right? but it's, I know this is, but that's how this happens. How else do you discover a passion, right? I mean, in that process. I mean, and he did it outside of traditional educational system, right? And then, I mean, and then it's like, and then there are other stories. Mikola Bartonova, so she's a Czech artist, does marionettes, right? Marionettes, it's an art that really hasn't been developed long. So she starts drawing and posting images. It's the first time she's using an iPad, posts them on Tumblr, gets positive encouragement, and ends up rethinking marionettes by live drawing stage sets on iPad using our app. And again, she was able to do this because you got feedback from an audience. And when you start looking at the stories that happen, and that's creativity in disciplines that didn't exist, like cats cartoons to cat making, that didn't exist before. Interactive marionette displays did not exist before, right? And then there are old art forms that are coming back. Sylvia Lynch, she's a UK artist, so she specializes in lady journals. So these are like, English ladies, that's what I'm imagining, who have sprawling gardens, would document the evolution of the seasons. And so she started doing that in paper and sort of brought an entire movement back with that, which is again, you're making more, right? There's not less. It's not that someone is losing. We're all gaining. It's a more beautiful world, right? We're all gaining.
Let's have a quick question here before we run out of time. Or not. If we don't, I'm going to ask you guys about sharing. Oh, wait, there was one. Yes.
So as I mentioned earlier, I have to imagine it's the same for these guys too. You know, it's truly getting to come up with some idea for something that you think you're excited to use, a tool that you think you might be able to use to make something cool, that you think other people might be able to use to make something cool, putting it together, shipping it in the middle of the day, coming back the next day and waking up and realizing that people have just used it in truly like 1,000 different ways that you never in a million years would have imagined. I'll give you one quick example. Just really a pointed one for me was something that talking about stretching the canvas, we realized that all these new phones suddenly had a panorama feature, which we thought was really pretty cool, but nobody supported them. They looked ridiculous on pretty much every site you could upload them to, and we're like, no, we need to make sure that the canvas can hold these big, high-res, really cool images. So we built this beautiful panorama view, or it pans automatically. You can scrub back and forth. So literally within a day of launching that feature, lots of panoramas as you would expect, the game development community on Tumblr took that up as a way to design boards, levels, to 2D video games. So they would publish whole long levels to these games that they were designing. That kind of thing, when you wake up and that's happening, and you never in a million years would have expected that to exist, or for that thing, the tool that you put out there to be used that way. That's awesome. And that feeling, it is truly one of the most fulfilling feelings in the world, and it's a big part of the drive, at least for us.
Economic growth is all about taking ideas and putting them together in ways which are incredibly obvious in hindsight, but actually just you need that kind of everyone coming together in a place like Tumblr to make it that much more vibrant. So just finish off, I'm going to ask very quickly about sharing, and is there a sort of economy of scale, or is there a way in which the reach that you guys have has deeply affected the creativity of the people who are using it? That being able to reach millions of people changes what you can do?
I mean, just because part of creation is having an impact. I mean, it's you just heard an impassioned speech by a creator who creates for others. It's the greatest. It's such a great joy, right? If you hope that the things you make have an impact, and when you look at stories like, there's a girl in Malaysia doing like illustrated poems. There's Silky the Creature. There is a UI designer on Tumblr who ends up getting a job, right? I mean, this all happens because they're sharing their ideas, right? And there's a generosity in sharing, right? The act of creation is an act of generosity because you hope the world will get you, right? And you're always the underdog. Most of the time the world doesn't get you, but you keep sharing, you keep getting it out there, and eventually you find your audience. And that's what's magical. You can actually find very small but meaningful audiences to you.
This is obviously a profoundly important thing for many, many creators. Not all of them, but many of them. I think one of the things that is so different in this new world is that we will start to reorient around what it means to have an audience. Because it used to be there were a select few that were blessed and got to have the audience. And then another sliver that got to perform, a significant grade below them, and then just everybody else. I think a bigger and bigger chunk of the everybody else is going to start to be able to reach a real audience. And more importantly than that, you're going to have people somewhere in the middle who are really content to have their 100 followers, have their 100,000 followers, even though they know they're not going to be the next Beyonce. They have found a community of people that care about what they're doing. They're using novel tools to commercialize that audience, and they're building a whole career, a whole purpose around that community and their creation. That's a pretty awesome, pretty novel thing that couldn't have existed before this kind of technology. So I'm excited about it.
Give your life meaning. Get on Tumblr, do awesome creative things, and don't worry about making money, because it'll make your life better anyway. Thank you both very, very much.